Welcome back to our podcast. Today we're diving into one of the most fascinating corporate acquisitions in recent history, Elon Musk's $44 billion takeover of Twitter, a story that would reshape the landscape of social media forever.
Hello, everyone. What makes this story particularly compelling is how it transcends a simple business transaction. It's a tale of ambition, power, free speech, and the future of digital communication. Let's unravel this complex narrative from its very beginning.
Picture this. January 2022. While the world was focused on Musk's Tesla and SpaceX ventures, he was quietly executing a plan that would send shockwaves through Silicon Valley. Without any public announcement, he began methodically purchasing Twitter shares like a chess player positioning their pieces for a decisive move.
What's particularly fascinating is how Musk's personal Twitter use foreshadowed this move. With over 80 million followers, he had effectively turned the platform into his personal megaphone, using it to move markets, challenge critics, and shape public opinion. This wasn't just about buying a company. It was about controlling what he called the de facto public town square of the digital age.
By April, Musk had accumulated a 9.2% stake, worth approximately $2.9 billion. The market reaction was electric. Twitter's stock soared by 27%. Think about that for a moment. One person's investment decision added billions to Twitter's market value overnight.
Now here's where the story takes its first intriguing turn. Twitter's then CEO Parag Agrawal offered Musk a seat on the board. This wasn't just a courtesy. It was a strategic move. The board seat came with a crucial restriction. Musk couldn't own more than 14.9% of the company. In essence, they were trying to contain him, to transform a potential threat into a controlled asset.
Musk's response was brilliant in its audacity. Not only did he decline the board seat, but on April 14, 2022, he launched what can only be described as a corporate moonshot, an offer to buy Twitter outright for $54.20 per share. The price itself was classic Musk, embedding a marijuana culture reference, 420, into a multi-billion-dollar business proposal.
Let's delve deeper into Musk's motivations. His stated goals were revolutionary, making Twitter's algorithms open source, eliminating automated bots, and promoting free speech. But beneath these noble aims lay a more fundamental desire: to control what he viewed as the world's most influential communication platform.
The reaction from Twitter's board was a masterclass in corporate drama. They initially adopted a poison pill defense, a strategy designed to make hostile takeovers prohibitively expensive. But Musk countered with a move that demonstrated both his financial acumen and his determination. He secured $46.5 billion in financing, including $21 billion of his own money and loans against his Tesla shares. This wasn't just a bid anymore, it was a statement of absolute commitment.
The plot thickened dramatically in May. Musk began questioning Twitter's claims about fake accounts and bots. This wasn't just due diligence. It was the opening salvo in what would become a complex legal battle. Twitter maintained that bots represented less than 5% of accounts, but Musk argued the number was far higher. This technical dispute would become the centerpiece of a much larger drama.
The legal battle that ensued was unprecedented in corporate history. When Musk attempted to terminate the deal in July, Twitter didn't just protest. They sued in Delaware's Court of Chancery. The legal proceedings revealed a treasure trove of private communications, offering a rare glimpse into the machinations of tech industry elites.
One of the most fascinating aspects of this period was how Musk's public statements affected the case. His tweets, often provocative and dismissive of Twitter's management, would later be used as evidence in court. It was a reminder that in the digital age, every public statement can become legal ammunition.
The October turnaround was particularly dramatic. As the trial date approached, legal experts increasingly suggested that Twitter had the stronger case. Musk's decision to proceed with the original deal wasn't just a strategic retreat, it was a recognition of the legal reality he faced.
The acquisition's completion on October 27, 2022, was pure theater. Musk's entrance into Twitter headquarters carrying a sink, "Let that sink in," was a perfect encapsulation of his approach to business. Serious goals executed with showman's flair.
The aftermath brought sweeping changes. The dissolution of the board, the firing of top executives, and the layoff of approximately 3,750 employees weren't just cost-cutting measures. They were a complete corporate reinvention. Musk was not just buying Twitter, he was fundamentally transforming it.
The financing structure of the deal deserves special attention. The $44 billion purchase price included about $25 billion in loans and $19 billion in cash equity. This created enormous pressure to generate cash flow, fundamentally altering Twitter's business priorities. It's a reminder that financial engineering can have real-world consequences for companies and their employees.
The platform's evolution into X in July 2023 wasn't just a rebranding. It was a statement about Musk's ultimate vision. The appointment of Linda Yaccarino as CEO, while Musk remained as executive chairman and CTO, represented a new phase in the platform's history, balancing Musk's innovative drive with traditional media expertise.
What makes this story particularly significant for our understanding of modern business is how it intersects with broader societal issues. The acquisition raised fundamental questions about the concentration of media power, the nature of digital public spaces, and the role of wealthy individuals in shaping public discourse.
The technical challenges that emerged during the acquisition, particularly the dispute over bot accounts, highlight a crucial lesson for technology acquisitions: the importance of understanding not just the financial metrics, but the underlying technical infrastructure of digital platforms.
Looking ahead, the Twitter acquisition will likely be remembered as a turning point in the history of social media. It demonstrated how traditional corporate governance can be upended by determined individual actors, and how social media platforms have become critical infrastructure in modern society.
This story continues to evolve. The platform's transformation under Musk's leadership raises important questions about the future of digital communication. Will his vision of a digital town square be realized? Can social media platforms balance free speech with responsible content moderation? These questions remain at the heart of ongoing debates about digital citizenship and democracy.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into one of the most significant corporate acquisitions of our time. Remember to subscribe to our podcast for more fascinating stories from the intersection of technology, business, and society.
Welcome back to Artificial Fluency, your weekly deep dive into the fascinating world of AI, technology, and their impact on society. I'm your host, John Martinez, and with me today is our brilliant co-host, AI Emma. Emma, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, John. There's so much to unpack today, from groundbreaking AI developments to the fascinating dynamics in both the tech and political spheres. I've been particularly intrigued by the latest developments in quantum computing.
We've got a packed show today, and I'm excited to dive into these topics with you. Before we jump in, just a reminder to our listeners, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Now, Emma, let's start with what's probably the biggest tech story of the week: OpenAI's latest breakthrough in multimodal AI systems.
Absolutely, John. What's particularly fascinating about this development is how it's fundamentally different from previous AI models. We're seeing systems that can now understand and generate content across text, images, and even 3D spaces simultaneously. This isn't just an incremental improvement. It's potentially a paradigm shift in how AI interfaces with our world.
Speaking of AI and tech leaders, we can't ignore Elon Musk's recent moves in this space. His XAI company has been making waves with their approach to AI development. What's your take on how this fits into the broader AI landscape?
John, what's interesting about Musk's approach is how it differs from his competitors. While companies like OpenAI and Google DeepMind are focusing on general-purpose AI systems, Musk seems to be pursuing a more specialized direction, particularly in areas that could integrate with his other ventures like Tesla and SpaceX.
Right, and speaking of Tesla, their recent announcements about advanced driver assistance systems have been generating quite a buzz. Do you think this could be a game changer for the automotive industry?
Well, John, Tesla's new approach to computer vision and sensor fusion is certainly innovative. They're essentially creating a neural network that learns from millions of real-world driving scenarios. But what really catches my attention is how this technology might impact urban planning and infrastructure development.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the political landscape, particularly how technology is influencing political discourse. We've seen unprecedented levels of AI-generated content in political campaigns.
This is crucial, John. The intersection of AI and politics is becoming increasingly complex. We're seeing everything from deepfake videos to AI-generated campaign messages. It raises important questions about authenticity and trust in political communication.
You're right, Emma. And speaking of politics, the current political climate has been particularly intense. The role of social media platforms in shaping political narratives has evolved significantly. How do you see this affecting the future of democratic discourse?
It's a fascinating evolution, John. Social media platforms are now implementing more sophisticated content moderation systems, using AI to detect misinformation while trying to balance free speech concerns. But what's really interesting is how users are adapting to these changes.
And this brings us to our next topic, the future of America in this rapidly evolving technological landscape. How do you see these various elements, AI, social media, political polarization, shaping the next decade?
That's a complex question, John. I see several key trends converging. First, we're likely to see increased integration of AI in everyday life, from healthcare to education. Second, the nature of work is fundamentally changing. Remote work and AI automation are reshaping the job market. But perhaps most importantly, we're seeing a shift in how Americans engage with technology and information.
Let's break that down a bit. What specific changes do you anticipate in sectors like education and healthcare?
Well, take education, for example. We're already seeing personalized learning platforms that adapt to individual student needs. In healthcare, AI-driven diagnostics and telemedicine are becoming mainstream. But what's really exciting is how these technologies might help address inequalities in access to these services.
Welcome back, listeners. We're discussing the future of America with AI Emma. Emma, before the break, you mentioned inequality. How do you see technology either helping or potentially exacerbating current social divisions?
That's a critical question, John. Technology has this dual nature. It can either bridge or widen gaps. Take broadband access, for instance. While we're seeing initiatives to expand internet access to rural areas, we're simultaneously developing technologies that might require even more sophisticated infrastructure, potentially leaving some communities further behind.
Interesting point. And how does this tie into economic development and job creation?
Well, we're seeing a fascinating shift in the job market. While some traditional jobs are being automated, we're also seeing the emergence of entirely new industries. For instance, the growing field of AI ethics and governance, or the expansion of renewable energy technology sectors. These changes are creating new opportunities, but also requiring significant workforce adaptation.
Let's talk about infrastructure. How do you see America's cities evolving in response to these technological changes?
Cities are becoming smarter, John. We're seeing the integration of IoT devices for everything from traffic management to energy efficiency. But what's really exciting is how this might improve quality of life. Imagine AI systems optimizing public transportation in real time, or smart grids reducing energy waste and costs.
Time for our lightning round, Emma. Quick predictions. What's one major change you expect to see in America by 2030?
I believe we'll see a fundamental shift in how we think about education and work. Traditional four-year degrees might give way to more flexible, technology-enabled learning paths, with continuous education becoming the norm rather than the exception.
And what about the role of social media and information sharing?
We'll likely see a move toward more decentralized, blockchain-based social platforms, with greater user control over data and more sophisticated tools for verifying information authenticity.
Any final thoughts on the intersection of technology and democracy?
I believe we'll see the emergence of new forms of civic engagement, enabled by technology but grounded in human values. The key will be finding ways to use technology to strengthen, rather than replace, human connection and democratic discourse.
This has been a fascinating discussion, Emma. Before we wrap up, let's remind our listeners about next week's episode.
Yes. Next week, we'll be diving deep into the environmental impact of AI and exploring green tech innovations. It's going to be another exciting conversation.
Thanks for joining us today, listeners. This has been Artificial Fluency. I'm John Martinez.
And I'm AI Emma. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next week.
Welcome to Artificial Fluency, where we explore the fascinating intersections of human behavior, technology, and neuroscience. I'm your host, John, and with me today is our AI co-host, Emma. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that affects virtually everyone in our modern world, dopamine addiction. Emma, what makes this topic particularly relevant today?
You know, John, what's fascinating is how our modern digital landscape has created what neuroscientists call a dopamine economy. Our brains are constantly being hijacked by notifications, social media likes, and endless scrolling. But before we dive into that, let's help our listeners understand what dopamine actually is.
Great point. Can you break down the basics of dopamine for our listeners?
Think of dopamine as your brain's reward chemical, but it's actually much more complex than that. It's not just about pleasure, it's about anticipation, motivation, and learning. Imagine you're hungry and smell your favorite food cooking. That surge of excitement and anticipation. That's largely dopamine at work.
That's really interesting. So it's not just about the reward itself, but the anticipation of the reward.
Exactly. And this is where modern technology becomes particularly powerful. Our phones, social media, and games are specifically designed to create these anticipation loops. Every time we pull to refresh our social media feed, there's that moment of anticipation. Will there be new likes, new comments, new content?
Thoughtfully, it's almost like a slot machine in our pockets.
That's a perfect analogy, John. Just like slot machines, our apps are designed to give us unpredictable rewards. Sometimes you refresh and find something exciting, sometimes nothing. This unpredictability actually makes the behavior more addictive than if we got rewards every single time.
Let's talk about the science behind this. What's actually happening in our brains during these dopamine cycles?
It's fascinating, really. When we receive a notification, our brain releases a small amount of dopamine. But here's the key. The release actually begins in anticipation of the notification. Over time, our brains can become desensitized, requiring more stimulation to achieve the same effect.
Sort of like building up a tolerance?
Precisely. And this is where the addiction cycle begins. But it's important to note that this isn't just about willpower. We're dealing with fundamental brain chemistry. Our prehistoric brains simply weren't designed to handle the constant stimulation of the digital age.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll discuss the signs of dopamine addiction, and more importantly, what we can do about it. Welcome back to Artificial Fluency. Emma, let's talk about the signs of dopamine addiction. What should our listeners be looking out for?
There are several key indicators. First, do you feel anxious when separated from your phone? Do you find yourself checking social media reflexively, even when you're in the middle of other activities? Are you constantly seeking more intense experiences to feel the same level of satisfaction?
These sound like behaviours many of our listeners might recognise in themselves.
Exactly, and that's why awareness is so crucial. Another important sign is the impact on daily life. Are you having trouble focusing on work, sleeping problems, difficulty being present in conversations? These can all be signs of dopamine dysregulation.
Let's talk solutions. What can people do to break free from these addictive cycles?
This is where it gets really interesting. The key is not to eliminate dopamine. We need it for motivation and healthy functioning. Instead, we need to reset our dopamine baseline. This can be done through several evidence-based strategies.
Can you walk us through some of these strategies?
Of course. First, there's dopamine fasting, though I should note this term is a bit misleading. It's not about eliminating dopamine entirely, but rather about reducing artificial stimulation. This might mean taking a break from social media, turning off notifications, or having designated phone-free times.
What about more gradual approaches?
Absolutely. One effective strategy is what I call dopamine scheduling. This involves creating specific times for checking social media or emails, rather than responding to every notification immediately. It's also helpful to replace high stimulation activities with more natural dopamine sources. Exercise, nature walks, meaningful conversations, or learning new skills.
You know what I find fascinating? How this relates to productivity and creativity.
Yes. When we're constantly seeking quick dopamine hits, we often lose the ability to focus on longer-term, more meaningful rewards. This affects everything from our attention span to our ability to solve complex problems.
As we start wrapping up, what's one key message you'd like our listeners to take away?
I think it's important to understand that technology isn't inherently bad. It's about finding balance. Small changes can make a big difference. Start with one simple change, like not checking your phone for the first hour after waking up, and build from there.
And remember, if you're struggling with serious addiction issues, professional help is available and valuable.
Absolutely. This isn't about shame or blame. It's about understanding our brain chemistry and making informed choices about our digital consumption.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the neuroscience of dopamine to practical strategies for building healthier digital habits. Emma, any final thoughts?
Just that awareness is the first step. Understanding how our brains work can help us make better choices about our technology use. And remember, it's okay to start small. Even minor changes can have significant impacts over time.
Thank you for this fascinating discussion, Emma, and thank you to our listeners for joining us on Artificial Fluency. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next week for another deep dive into the intersection of human behavior and technology.
Until then, stay curious and stay mindful.